Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
Yeah. Well, let's start off in New Haven. And we always kind of joke that, I don't know who gets sued more, LA or New Haven, but and I'm not trying to be mean here, but I've always kind of thought this is a silly lawsuit a little bit. And I don't mean to be pejorative, but here we have an assistant chief who alleged that the city, the fire chief, several others were interfering in basically his employment contract, such that he then retired. And the court has thrown this out in favor of the defendants, including Frank Ricci. For everybody who knows him, he's the one who took New Haven to the U.S. Supreme Court and was victorious there. So here, basically, there are a number of claims that the assistant chief makes. And again, I'm not trying to be mean by any imagination, but the court even here kind of says these are kind of thin. First he's like, well, there's negligent supervision, right? And that the employees and everyone were negligently supervised. And
well, he felt the chief should have intervened. I think that's what it is. He felt the chief should have intervened.
And the court there, with regard to that claim, says, look, they said that's a discretionary act, how they acted. It's not ministerial, meaning they acted for policies, and is fairly universal. I'm going to say for every state, almost every state, we have the same principle, which is that employees of a public entity are not going to be liable for their discretionary decisions following a discretionary practice, right? Not policy, practice. But they would be liable if they failed to follow a non-discretionary policy, and policies are non-discretionary by their terms. So here he says there's no evidence of that they failed to follow a policy, and if it was they failed to act properly in their discretion, which supervision of an employee, of course, is in most instances
it's inevitably discretionary. Yeah.
Well, maybe not with things like sexual harassment type thing to say, well, you can't harass somebody. There's no right, but generally how you oversee them is discretionary. And the court also said, listen, there wasn't an actual loss. Your retirement was voluntary. It's funny because I have this exact case right now that we're working on to submit, or just submitted actually to court. But where an employee resigns and, is voluntary, it's all voluntary, they kind of waive their rights to protest anything. And the court says that's what happened here. He voluntarily retired. So there can't be a tortious interference with my contract claim, right? You interfered with my employment. Well, but you retired. Had he been forced out, that might have been something different. If there was coercion or duress where he had to retire, that would have been something different. And then I've never seen this before. He makes a claim for invasion of privacy, but couches it as, well, you interfered with my seclusion or solitude, which the court says, okay, that's invasion of privacy. I've never heard of that. That doesn't mean anything.
No, it is. It's one of, I think there's 4 or 5 different branches of the tort of invasion of privacy, and intrusion upon the seclusion is one of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the court makes short work of that and says, well, there's, factually, there was a recording of a phone conversation. The plaintiff tried to say, well, it was an intentional kind of breach of my privacy, but the court said, I guess I listened to it, and it was, you just didn't hang up when you left a voicemail, and the voicemail kept recording because you didn't hang up the phone, so there wasn't any intentional invasion of privacy. I thought that, and I can't imagine that one phone call would result in that, but in any event, it was strange to me that the attorney would plead that knowing you just didn't hang up the phone. It's crazy.
I don't know if because it seemed to me that perhaps they didn't know how she ended up with the recording, but somehow she ended up with the recording, and I'm assuming shared it with the chief or whomever. And the whole thing to me comes down to big city union politics, and I think Frank Ricci, I'm glad, I know Frank well, and I am glad that I was not the fire chief where Frank Ricci was the union president. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Because you know, he is going to challenge you and challenge you and challenge you, and that's basically, and I mean that in a complimentary way. But that sometimes is going to be very painful. And I think what the chief, you know, the assistant chief was saying was that, you know, Frank was coming at him almost with the cooperation of others, which, you know, I can understand how he could perceive it that way, you know, and I'm telling you, it's so difficult to be a big city chief these days, fighting the union, fighting the politics, fighting the people. And you know, many chiefs really feel like they're on an island by themselves. And it's really, you know, if you have anybody to lean on, it's got to be the other people in the front office. And when you don't have them to lean on, it can be a very difficult challenge.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a chief who had, you know, a union, although 12 people plus part-timers, not hundreds, right? But I took a different view, and then we'll move on, but I took a different view of the union. You know, I said, listen, that was a contract that was negotiated between the municipality, my boss at the time, right, and the union, and it's my job to adhere to that. And if I overstep or misstep, then the union should take me to task on it. They fought hard for the, you know, that, and it is more typically the union who says, oh, you're misapplying or misinterpreting. And I get it. I think if the union sees that the employer is not living up to their side of the contract, they should be fighting it. They fought for that.
Well, they did, but I'm going to tell you, I would say for my 29 years in Providence, we had labor management warfare, open warfare from when we started, because the city was trying to close companies, and they were successful ultimately in doing some of that. They were cutting benefits. They were doing things that if I had the time to go through it, you would agree the city was unethical. Okay, now I want you to think about you in your situation as the fire chief, where the city has behaved unethically, but yet you have to keep running the fire department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they've, you know, and I think that's the challenge, is how I've said this in many of my classes, but how as a leader do you lead people who believe they've been cheated? And it's a challenge. And I don't think, I mean, I don't know the politics in Manlius, but I'm going to tell you, it gets very, very nasty. And you have elected officials who are looking, the mayor, and they want to become the governor or a congressman or whatever. And they're doing things knowing they're not going to be there when the proverbial shit hits the fan. They're going to be someplace else. They make a decision to fight something, and then they walk away, they go get another job. And the firefighters are still there, and they're fighting all of these. I've seen pensions cut, healthcare cut, salaries cut or not honored. We had not to get off the subject. We had a
we're so far off the subject.
Well, I know. We had a mayor. I want you to just understand just how unscrupulous some of these are. We had a mayor, and this was to the chiefs, called the chiefs in about a week before Christmas. You know, City Hall is all decorated and everything. And he says, you guys haven't had a raise in 8 years, and I understand it. You're part of management, so we're going to give you a 16% raise. We're going to bring you up to where the raises that the police, because the union and the city were at war, so we didn't get any pay raises because the firefighters didn't. Bottom line is, they call us in, 16% rate. We all left there like on cloud nine, left City Hall. Right after Christmas, the chief calls us in. He goes, the mayor misspoke. There will be no raises.
Misspoke? Jesus.
Yeah, misspoke. That's the kind of crap.
And and the chief has to bear that.
He does.
I'll tell you, in a smaller department, that's harder, because in a big department, the chief is not sending the guys into the fire, or maybe not going in with them. In a smaller department, you piss off your guys in the afternoon or in the morning, but in the afternoon, you're working a structure fire with them. Bitter feelings, you know, they stay on the fire ground despite.
I hear you. I hear you.